Canopy Growth's co-CEO, Bruce Linton, stepping down from his post. Shares dropping. Let's show you what's going on with those shares. Literally, as we speak, they had fallen off as much as 7% before. They've come back a little bit right now. But joining us on the Squawk Newsline, we've been speculating about what's happened here. Bruce Linton is with us. Bruce, give us the backstory. Why are you stepping down? And we should say you're not only stepping down from the CEO role, you're stepping down from the board.
Well, I think stepping down might not be the right phrase, right? On November 1, we closed $5 billion, $4 billion for about 17% of the company. And a condition of that closing was the board had to be reconfigured. About 8 months and 2 days later, I think the board had decided they wanted a different chair and a different co-CEO. So I'm out effective immediately, and there's a search to replace the transitioning co-CEO.
Bruce, just to be clear, have you been terminated or did you step down on your own? And
I was terminated.
Okay.
So you were fired.
So
there's a lot of words for it. Was that Kevin?
Hey, yes, it's Kevin.
Hey,
here.
Bruce, there's life after firing. Trust me, okay? You're going to be just fine, okay?
Bruce, I want to go back. You are such a hammer.
Kevin was one of my first interviews in the sector. And because it was Kevin and he was expecting me to look like a hippie, I wore a three-piece suit. And he just sat there looking at me going, I don't even know what this guy's about. I'm just going to try and wait till he gets off this segment. But how are you, Kevin?
Very good. And I want to ask you a question, Bruce. What happens next? You are a hammer in the Canadian market for raising capital. You are the industry and were for years. Where are you going? What are you going to do?
Well, I've already gone to Costco and filled one car with gas this morning. I got a long list of important stuff like that to do, and I would hope by the end of the day I've figured out what's up next, and it won't be in cannabis in Canada, but there's a pretty big world out there.
But, Bruce, take us behind the scenes, because clearly, and this has been a surprise to the market, to investors, to analysts, what happened here? Give us whatever, I imagine, your vision of the future of this company was and how that must have differed with the board.
So I think the company is in great shape because we did a couple of things. One is when we hired really great people, we loaded them up with long-term employee stock option programs. So there's a bunch of great people that are going to continue to work through. The transition will be a bit odd because nobody, including me, was necessarily expecting it. But I do think that we have this IP-driven global rolling force that is going to be the dominant player. And from my perspective, I'm pretty upbeat today, not because of being terminated, but because in 6 years to create something that's got 4,000 people in 16 countries and the market cap that's touched 20 billion, that's been a productive period of time. And so I think it's actually going to be the dominant company, and I'm wearing my tweed shirt today because I still feel that.
Bruce, you were credited with bringing in the Constellation investment in the first place, and here Constellation is effectively handing you your walking papers. Do you really agree with the direction that Constellation wants to take this company in, considering they're getting rid of you?
Yeah, I think the direction they want to take it will be determined. I don't know how material it will change instantly or anything. But, you know, when we looked at this, both Mark and I assessed the circumstance, and it was our view in August when we were announcing that it was really important for the company we take the $5 billion because otherwise Constellation, who is a very powerful company, may have decided that they would put other oars in the water. And this made them 100% fully structurally integrated, no other options but Canopy.
But do you
regret? So, you know, when you bring in a big check and you change the board, unless you're like living in La La Land, there's always some perceived risk, but it would have been worse for the company if we didn't do that.
But, Bruce, do you regret how this is all shaken out? Would you have rather you'd gone with a different partner, perhaps?
I think there was no other partner. Like a big check from a lot of these other guys was $50 million, $100 million. The first check from Constellation was effectively $500 million. Right? It was a $245 million followed by $245. They're serious players. Like those guys make decisions, they go for bets. And the way that they can make a big decision on putting big money in is the same way as they can make a big decision on time for a new way to go at this with leadership. So,
Bruce, you were recently one of the executives in this industry that were sensitive to the institutional investors' demand to bifurcate the industry into medicinal versus recreational. I can't invest in any of this because it's Schedule I narcotic. You had a plan. You talked about this recently, that you were looking at bifurcating or at least going in a direction where I could invest in medicinal. Is that one of the reasons you had some friction here?
No, that hasn't been specific. So what I was talking about there is I think part of the complication for analysts covering a sector and looking at Canopy is, do you cover it with the ag, pharma, CPG, or industrial? And so I think the right thing for the company over time is that it's actually really sort of 4 discrete entities, and we've begun working on taking the production assets and putting them into sort of like a REIT or a lease lend back, so we could free up almost $2 billion in capital to put back to the pharma research and products. Over time, you know, what kind of sector has farmers and has physicians, right? This is a pretty
Bruce,
complicated model because of regulatory requirements.
Here's the part that I don't understand. There's a lot of people, investors in particular, who have bought into you personally, not just the company, but you personally. This seems like a decision that's been made overnight, but it sounds from what you're saying this was in the making almost from the beginning. When did you know that this was in the offing, and what do you think really led to it?
Well, I didn't know for sure, but when sort of a unexpected board meeting gets called on a Friday afternoon for the Tuesday, one does have to wonder, if I'm the chairman and not calling the meeting, I suspect it's about the chairman.
So that just happened last week? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, Friday. So, you know, these things, this is a big boys game, right? We're talking about billions of dollars in enterprise value, and Canopy is an awesome company. Like, the thing that we've put together, it's not Bruce just going on TV and explaining how the world should work. It's the people back at the shop doing all the work. And so, like, I would say to investors, I think the company's built really solid, and it will go through this transition. Is it a fun day for Bruce? Well, no, but, like, tomorrow, who knows? Maybe I'm working while you guys are off on
Has the board done any, did the board do anything nice on your way out? Meaning they give you anything?
You always get a nice
they were saying thank you for
your
playing? What were you saying?
You always get a nice gratuity when you're asked to leave, but you know, in the context of everything that's been created, it's not a meaningful thing. It's just a pleasant thing.
What was the consolation prize?
Oh, you always get, you know, if you were coming to work for a couple of years, we would have paid you this. But these sorts of things, I think it's more about, for me, I've had so many people firing me texts and stuff saying, you know, you guys have created a sector. It's not just a company. And I think that the work with the media that you guys have helped facilitate has allowed people who wouldn't have had a conversation about this as an investment thesis to actually become investors over the last year.
What do you think the last straw was, in the view of the board, Bruce? Was it the last quarterly report that you posted, which was disappointing?
I think that, you know, they expressed some disappointment there, but I really think at the end of the day, sometimes entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs because they're not super employable. And I would say I probably don't have a resume because I like creating businesses and driving them. And you don't always mesh well with everybody in the playpen. So I think probably what they're doing will actually be a better decision. It's just not a great day for Bruce.
Bruce, do you still have all your stock? Are you planning to sell any of the stock?
I think I have a pretty good chunk. So no, I'm not planning to sell. I'm wearing blackout now. So I think I'm sitting on a few million shares, and I would expect, I think as the U.S. opens and the deal with Acreage becomes activated, my stock is worth a multiple then of what it's worth now.
Bruce, it's Anthony Scaramucci. Just curious, is this the first time you've been fired?
Oh, God, no. This is not the first company I've created. So there was one which was bought by Microsoft for the IP. That one was looking for funding after 9/11 when the VCs put in their, whatever you want to call it, ratchet round. You can't agree with it, so you go. Yeah, that was the main one. But no, I find entrepreneurs at a certain point in time, it's not about competency of doing all the tasks. It's about alignment with how to govern and doing the tasks. So, yeah, and hey, listen, I look forward to getting back to your restaurant just off the square and actually getting to say hi to you.
Bruce,
I appreciate it.
One last question here. Diversification is the only free lunch in investing. Now you're not constrained. Is there another cannabis company, if you could take some of those 18 million shares and invest it in that one just to hedge your bets? Which one would that be?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like, when I'm on the road marketing, I always tell everybody you should buy at least half of your portfolio with Canopy. And if you're looking for a second one, what I like in the Canadian market because of how they run themselves is Organigram. I've found them to be pretty solid. And if you're trying to diversify, I like Rivers. So Canopy Rivers is structured so that you actually have about 14 investments in one portfolio, but it's done by people who know the sector. So those would be my diversified portfolio choice and my individual.
Hey, Bruce, one question actually coming in from a viewer asking whether this was related at all. About a week ago, the company announced that it had improperly used, it basically had to issue a correction on your adjusted EBITDA. Did that have anything to do with this?
Not to my knowledge. I think this is just more of a transition of philosophy and management, and I don't think it's much more than that. And I think it'll actually, when they search, this will probably be the most applied to job in North America. So I don't think there'll be a particular challenge finding somebody with more capabilities.
So that's interesting. Is there somebody you'd like to take your job?
Yeah, I have to. It's unpopular, but I think Elon should take something else on because he's a pretty creative guy.
Are you saying that Mark Zekulin
really
is not going to? I mean, the board announced that Mark Zekulin is now the CEO. Is that not a permanent move?
No, if you look at the press release,
Okay.
they're doing a search that will look for internal, external candidates.
Bruce, how confident are you at the moment that other countries, maybe in Europe, follow suit that we've seen in Canada and the US? Is that something that you think is coming quicker, slower than you originally expected?
Yeah. I think it's coming quicker. It ebbs and flows a little bit based on regional pressure, just like we see with the New York, New Jersey sort of thing for the U.S. But the public policy experience is in the eye. Most of them now are looking at how do they grab hold of the research opportunity and the IP opportunity. So I think it's driving a different part of the government than it may have when it was driven by the courts.
Okay. Bruce Linton, we want to thank you.